Nice to finally formally meet you.
Thank you, thank you.
Oh.
I graduated high school May 26th of 2000.
I used to do a lot of film photography. I don't do much anymore.
Okay.
I'm the Hinds County District Attorney, which makes me the top.
Hi guys, it's Faith Simone here.
I'm Amanda Wells.
Hi, it's Jody Owens.
Hello everybody, this is your girl Hillary Christian.
Hi, I'm Tom Beck.
Enjoying my evening with the Dirty Napkins crew. Make sure.
Let's go get some napkins dirty.
How does a young kid?
I think it's so critical.
Literally, you can say bad things about me, it can be false.
I had a number in my head.
What's one of your more proud moments? What would you say?
So every day is different. We're learning something new every single day.
She said, well, tried it.
There's always something burning inside you.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Dirty Napkins. Be sure to follow us on all social media platforms at Dirty Napkins. Until next time, it's your host, Taylor. Welcome back, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Dirty Napkins. Tonight, we're at the Downtown Cigar Company, and I'll be meeting with one of Jackson's most influential people, the District Attorney of Hinds County, Jody Owens. We'll discuss topics ranging from racism all the way to prison reform. Tune in. Let's go get some napkins dirty. I'm here today with a very, very special guest. I'll let you, before we get started into the conversation, I'll let you introduce yourself to the people.
Okay, well, I'm Jody Owens. I'm the Hinds County District Attorney, which makes me the top prosecutor for about 8 cities: Jackson, Byram, Utica, Raymond, Terry, Learned, Edwards. And of course, what that means is that anybody who commits a felony crime is prosecuted by my office.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a good explanation to start things off, and I kind of want to follow that with the explanation, right? I know, by you being a elected official in a public office, if there's a question I ask you, I'm kind of coming at this from a journalistic standpoint, right? But if there's a question I ask you that may be something you don't want to comment on, just let me know. We slide to another topic.
Absolutely.
Right? But to start the conversation off, Jody, I was glad that we had a chance to meet last week so we could kind of break the ice. That was really good. But to start the conversation off, tell us a little bit about your upbringing.
Okay, so I was raised in a place called Terry, Mississippi.
Okay.
And both of my parents were educators. I grew up on a horse farm, essentially. We had horses and cows. My father is one of 7 siblings that stay on the same 40 acres. In Terry, all the siblings still stay on the same 40 acres. Okay. So I grew up before school, typical country boy, putting hay out, feeding cows and horses, mowing, several acres of a lawn. Very great childhood. I had parents who loved me. It's one of the things I figured out as we examine the criminal element of what happens, is that most kids can be productive adults if they just have one person that loves them. And I had 2. So life was simple. I had approximately, on both sides, my mom's one of 8, my dad's one of 7. So I have almost 45 first cousins. So huge family, and then a huge church family.
Yeah.
So, family was the most central part of who we are as a family. You don't always have to like each other, but you have to love each other.
Yeah.
And just a great country childhood.
That's a big family, like you said, 8 on one side, 7 on the other side. Did you think, when you think back to your childhood, right? Is this what young Jody wanted? Like, is becoming a district attorney? What do you think what did young Jody want to do?
Young Jody identified very early that there were some things he was good at and some things he was not good at.
Okay.
Math and science were not my subjects.
Gotcha.
Talking all the time, arguing all the time. I did appreciate that I had to use those gifts to advance my interest. I was not the best student as a middle school student. Okay. I peaked sometime in high school and then continued to ascend. I never knew I would actually feel comfortable in this role because I've always been the underdog champion, right? So I want to fight for those who are actually less fortunate. In fact, my first legal job was with a law firm called Butler Snow, and they're the kind of largest law firm in Mississippi. And because I was frustrated with having all these huge clients, I used to represent AT&T and Walmart and Chick-fil-A, right? And the cases would never go to trial, but we spent years litigating about the cases.
Okay.
So I asked then the firm chairman if I could go volunteer at the public defender's office, primarily because in DC, where I went to law school at Howard, I found that was the office where you actually champion the people, particularly people of color, because you realize that generally the system was stacked against them. So I always thought I would be representing more people as opposed to prosecuting them. So it's funny how God's plan kind of moves you in places you don't expect.
So you mentioned Howard. Was Howard your first stop, or did you go? Well, you say you went there for law school. So
Correct.
Prior to law school, where did you?
I went to Jackson State University.
Okay, JSU.
Yeah, JSU. My whole family had gone to Jackson State. My parents, most of my uncles and aunts. I grew up when you could go to the Memorial Stadium and Jackson State would be playing Alcorn, and 60,000 people would be in the stands. I mean, you would literally be sitting on the steps. So there was a lot of pride in HBCUs. There was a lot of pride in identity and knowing who we were as a people. And that's one of the reasons I chose Howard. I mean, I got into several law schools, all of the state law schools, got 4 scholarships. But I chose to take dead on to go to Howard because when I went to that law school campus, it was like, wow, this is something different.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was, in hindsight, the best decision I could have ever made.
Okay. And let's talk back to when you say Jackson State, going to the game, 60,000 people. Have you been following them at all this spring season?
I think all of us
Yeah.
in the country are excited about where we are. I look at things through leadership visions. Obviously, it's great for Jackson, it's great for Jackson State, and we're talking about Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, but to me, as a leader of an office that's trying to stop the perception and the reality of crime in Hinds County, I look at the impact that Deion Sanders has made. One individual has made such a significant impact. I mean, it's just one man, let's be clear.
Yeah.
I mean, the players that were on the team before he got there are still players now who are 3-0. The culture, the uniforms, but one person can make that difference, and that's kind of my mantra on how I've tried to be successful. Is like, you can be a difference maker, a change maker, a value added if you realize that those tools. Now, obviously, Coach Prime had a significant career.
Yeah.
I grew up loving number 21. that high step in the hands behind the heads.
Right.
We all saw that.
Right.
But it still shows you one person can be that impactful, and that's all that really has ever changed the world. One person being extraordinary when the time called for it, and that his time is now, and I think the whole city and the state's benefiting from it.
Sure. And when you talk about leadership, what do you think constitutes a good leader?
Well, I think there are 2 types of leaders. Okay. There's either, and my motto has always been servant leadership. I've always been willing to do whatever I ask of other people. I think that's the problem with some leaders. If there's a sheet of paper on the ground, it doesn't matter if it's your job, it needs to be picked up. But when I look at leadership, it's either you lead by example, or you're someone who can inspire and create an atmosphere and a culture of winning. It doesn't matter if it's sports, it doesn't matter if it's law, business. Do we have a common mission, a common purpose, and frankly, are we respectful in creating an environment where people feel like they can be their best selves? Oftentimes you have the wrong people doing the wrong things, and they just need to be realigned with their priorities. Like my folks will tell you, I hate when people tell me that we're doing something because it's always been done. And that's horrible. I mean, we have to do something because it makes sense and it advances what we're trying to do. And that's kind of the style that I've tried to emulate over the last 17 so months, and I think we're seeing the strides there now.
Okay. And when you went to Howard, I heard you say that you saw the campus, you fell in love with the campus. Is actually a really good thing, because I can't remember where I saw this statistic, but there are only like 8 HBCU law schools remaining or something like that. When I was looking up your credentials, I was like, that's an interesting fact, and I don't know why there aren't more HBCU law schools. But do you think that going to a HBCU law school helped prepare you better for being the district attorney for like a Hinds County, right? Because I'm not sure if this is accurate. It seems to be more predominantly black. But do you think there's any correlation in those two?
Well, I think there's a larger conversation to be had about HBCUs as a whole.
Okay.
Right. And what people need to understand about HBCUs is that they never, in the history of all HBCUs, denied people because of race, right? HBCUs came into an existence because white schools, majority schools, would not let African Americans attend. And we are in Mississippi, and it's just a generation removed where people who are our age, our grandparents, couldn't go to these schools. We all know about George Wallace in Alabama standing on the steps, segregation now, segregation forever. We all know about Ross Barnett denying, admission to the University of Mississippi. So for me, I'm always there, okay, what's the core of that? And I have tons of friends that go to majority schools, tons of black friends that make those decisions. For me, I think that you want people to go in a place where they're most comfortable, and that's what Howard was to me. I think that as far as preparation goes, I think when you're dealing with institutions that are historically and fundamentally racist, and if we're being frank, that's the country, right? Yeah. I mean, if we're identifying that people of color were constitutionally mandated to be 3/5 of a person, and we've seen how far we've come in places like Mississippi. I mean, you and I are in Mississippi right now, and the state flag just changed within the last, 7-8 months from the Confederate flag. And to me, when you look like the insurrection on the Capitol in Washington, D.C., and you see people carrying that flag, and you see people like Dylan Roof shooting up Ebenezer Baptist Church in South Carolina, holding that flag. Yeah. And I had a guy come in my office today, a U.S. attorney, and he said, man, he looked around and said, where's the Mississippi flag? I said, right there. And it was the first time in my life, 40 years living, that I was proud enough to say I have the state flag, because I would never have the Mississippi flag in my office, despite living here, despite running for office here, despite swearing under oath. I took my military oath here, I took my bar oath here, I took my district attorney oath here, but I couldn't swear to a flag that was so perjured in nature. So that's a long way of saying that I do think that Howard and institutions like Jackson State prepare you for understanding the reality, quote unquote being woke, right? Yeah. Well, a lot of us have been woke a long time without having to say be woke. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you said a lot there. I want to touch on a few points. And the first thing is you talked about the pride you have for the new flag. I 100% agree with you. I think we talked about it a little bit last week that, I live in Texas, but now is the first time I had ever considered, I want to buy a Mississippi flag, put it outside of my home in Texas. Right? I would have never done that before the old flag got taken down. So I agree with you wholeheartedly there. You also mentioned when you swore into the military, right? Let's talk a little bit about that. So you are a veteran. I'm a veteran myself as well. You're a veteran of the Navy though, correct? Talk to me a little bit about that process for you and why you decided to go into the military.
It's a strange story. I don't have any immediate family that served, so I didn't have that desire, and I didn't need the military to pay for school. I just wanted to serve. So at 7, I finished high school at 17, and I wanted to join the Marines. And my mother, being the wonderful woman she is, refused to sign off for me. She had to sign off. She said, my baby's not going anywhere. So she didn't sign off for me, and I never lost the urge. And I went to Jackson State, and I would see ROTC. That's not really what I wanted to do. Went to Howard, saw people who served, and I never lost the urge. So I learned about the intelligence community through some mentorship through the bar. And when I researched it, I could not find anything about it.
Oh, wow.
Right, so to me, I was like, okay, this is really interesting. And so I was had my first child, and I went to officer school and became an officer in the Navy. And I'm currently a lieutenant. I've been in 8 years in reserves now. Wow. I've solved so many things throughout the world, but I do think, not to sound cliche, but the opportunity to serve, the opportunity to lead, have been present for me. But I mean, Taylor, you probably get this more than most. The things in life that are most impactful for us are the things that give you more than you've given it. And that's how I feel about my kids, my family, my church, and certainly the military too. I mean, the opportunity to have uniform on. It's like 0.1% of people who do it, who understand what we're doing, what we're called to do. it certainly has given me more than I've given it.
Sure. And yeah, I can echo that same sentiment. For me, it was, I'll be honest and say it was a little more selfish what I got out of it, but I wouldn't be here today interviewing you without the military. And a black man who put me into the military saw me as a young kid, just like you. I was 19, failed out of Jackson State. I was like, this isn't working for me, right? And he said, I know you don't know what you want to do, but you seem to be pretty good with people. You seem to be okay with words. Let me help you mold that into some, being able to talk and being able to articulate yourself. And because of that, I've had a lot of opportunities. So the military did a lot for me. I got out though, but it did a lot for me.
Don't say short now. We do research on each other. You did get the award for the entire state of Texas, right?
Yeah, wow.
After bringing more people in. So let's be clear, Texas is about, 4 Mississippis, maybe 5?
Yeah.
So it's pretty significant. How it also gives you an opportunity to use your God-given talents,
You caught me by storm right there. You got me. You caught me red-handed. Well, let's talk a little bit about, now that I understand a little bit more about your upbringing, how did you go from Howard to DA, right? I'm sure that wasn't, I got my law degree and now I want to be the DA. How did that process work?
Weird. Things happen that you don't understand why it's happening. And an example I tell people is that, you live life forward, but you understand it backwards, right? And for me, I went to Butler Snow because it's the largest firm, the best firm. They paid, really the highest salary. And I had law student debt. Living in DC was expensive, but I also saw that they had a true commitment to diversity. They, when I went to law school, a lot of your majority firms came to Howard to find their African American lawyers. If they
really,
so while Howard might not be ranked as high as some schools, the big firms that came to Howard went to Harvard, Yale, Berkeley, and Howard was in that list of the top 10. This is awesome. And Butler Snow came, they committed there. That was great. I learned how to practice law, great friends, great experiences for a young lawyer. But then something was pulling in my heart. Something was kind of moving with me to do something more in the nonprofit world. An opportunity presented itself for an organization called the Southern Poverty Law Center, and they had made a significant commitment to Mississippi. That's federal litigation, class action, so we were suing about economic rights, gay rights, prisons, schools, and I had this unlimited budget to sue and hold Mississippi accountable. It was the best 9 years of my life legally because I was able to hold the system accountable by using policy. We lobbied, had 2 full-time lobbyists. We litigated, we educated the community. A lot of folks are not familiar with this concept, but systemic change is using a lot of different factors to bring about change in the community. And you look at how we got here. Pick any problem in Mississippi. Education, one of the last states with quality education. The prison population, top 5 in prison population. Access to health care. All these issues were intentional and systematic. So I had the blessing to be a civil rights lawyer, and I leaped on faith. I left the job, took about a $50,000 pay cut, huge for a young guy with just trying to figure out life and money, and we made a difference. I had some colleagues who were so talented, who were all committed to making a difference. And then ultimately, what ultimately happened was my predecessor decided to run for governor 6 days before the qualifying deadline.
Okay.
And I had always thought, okay, well, if you're going to run for something like the military, if you're going to do it, at some point in time you got to do it. But most things are about opportunity and preparation. Am I ready? And this is the right opportunity, because every opportunity is not the right opportunity. So for me, within 6 days, it was announced, and people encouraged me to run. And I said, well, it's not really my thing. I've been visiting every prison in Mississippi. I've defended people who've done some of the most horrendous crimes because everybody deserves competent representation. But it came, and I realized that while some of us in the civil rights community think that prosecutors are all bad people, well, prosecutors have power. And if you have a mindset of understanding the system, you would like to leverage that power to right-size the system. So for example, if I'm identifying that Mississippi has a disproportionate number of African Americans who are incarcerated, which they do, greatly. And we all know Mississippi's strong racial history, which leans toward poor, brown and black people not having access to representation. They get longer sentences for less crimes, even though we know all races do drugs the same component, and they're punished disproportionately. Well, in my position, my whole goal for being DA is that I can still maintain public safety, but also fix that problem that has took fathers and brothers and husbands from our communities for so long. Because when you eradicate the family, we started this conversation and I didn't know that was a common question, but if you take away the family, the nucleus, you're making it hard for people to really succeed. And that's what I think the prison system has done, not to mention the economic brand of the prisons, private prisons, making money off incarcerating people, not to mention the disparities in the system as a whole. Can I afford a lawyer?
Yeah.
If not, I want to be appointed to you, but that lawyer might have 1,000 cases.
Yeah.
And so she or he is doing the very best they can, but the whole goal was we can make this thing better, and this is an opportunity to do so. I don't want to call it a mission or an experiment, but I will say that I thought that if we applied the principles that we believed in doing the job, we could bring equity to the system.
Okay.
So.
And you said a lot in that, and I got a few points on that I want to revisit, right? So I'll start the conversation. You mentioned to me that you wanted me to watch a TED Talk. I think the guy's name was Brian Stevenson.
Right, Brian Stevenson, yeah.
So I watched the TED Talk, great recommendation. But in that, there were some staggering facts that he brought up, right? And this wasn't necessarily directed towards Mississippi, but in general.
Right.
One of the things he said was 1 in 4 black men between the age of 18 and 30 are in prison. He said roughly about 32% of all black men that are between the ages of 18 to 35 have lost their right to vote.
Right.
And then the last thing was something around like the chances of a black man being convicted over with the same crime, and I'm probably butchering this statistic, was like 30 to 40% higher than their Caucasian,
Right.
counterpart. So when I say all of those kind of facts, how does the DA come into, I guess, helping to decrease those numbers, or is that something that your office even has? Is that even something your office can help with?
Yes. So we have a concept in our office, and it was something that we ran on, that we report on in our office, which is called smart justice. And smart justice means that incarceration in itself does not make us safer. Like, there was a concept, you look at the war on drugs from previous presidential administrations, they had the myth of the super predator. They had the myth of we have to do all these things to stop, to be safe. But it was never that we have to focus on mental health.
Yeah.
It was never that we have to focus on education. It was that we have to build huge prisons and fill them with people. So our office has a commitment to those things. It's called diversion. Statistically, what we know is that when you first introduce somebody, statistically what we know is when you first introduce somebody to the prison system, that what happens is that they can never get away from it. So it blows your mind. You look at those statistics, and I've talked to Brian about this, and he's come to Mississippi. He has a great book, Just Mercy Out, and they actually did a movie about it.
Did he write that book?
Yeah, that was his book.
Oh, okay. I saw the movie. Michael B. Jordan in it?
Right.
Okay, got you.
And Brian was one of the people that kind of inspired me in this process. He has an amazing museum in Montgomery committed to lynchings and hangings and significantly talk about these issues. But to make a long story short, I think progressive DAs have to keep in mind what they know about the system to make it better. They have to keep in mind that if you know this, if you know better, you have to do better, right? So when I'm prosecuting somebody for a crime, I have to be willing to look at the things that made them who they are. I have to be willing to look at their school history and their disability history. I mean, for example, when kids get in trouble in school and they have, say, a learning disability, the very thing they got in trouble for might be a manifestation of their disability, right? I mean, obviously you're brilliant, you say you stopped going to Jackson State, but at the same time, it wasn't the right time for you to be there.
Yeah.
So I think that we have not traditionally looked at the model of what we're asking of our kids, our men, our women, and put real life factors to that. Sure. And having lived those experiences, having been in every prison in Mississippi, having met with thousands of inmates, having held their hands and prayed with them and gone to court on their behalf, I really get the redemption value of the human spirit. I believe in it, right? And this is something Brian said early on, and I've always appreciated. And none of us is the worst thing we've ever done.
Yeah,
right.
That was profound.
Yeah,
I heard that.
None of us is the worst thing we've ever done, and that's true. I mean, we've all done things we're not proud of. We've all done things that if I could do it over, I might not have done that. But that's part of the bigger life experience of living and growing. And if you can remember that, and you can remember to take that into prosecution, you have a lot more humility in the power that you have, because it's kind of unchecked power, the decisions you make, the things you do, but you have to be humbled but for grace.
Sure.
But for God, that could have been me. When you see a kid breaking into the house because his mom told him to go do it, to be the man of the house, to feed him, and that's the only option he has. She is, selling her body. He is selling drugs. He is taking stuff from people. Well, oftentimes that's what you was taught. It's right.
Yeah.
That's what you will do.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we've tried to take into consideration. But the reality is, when somebody breaks into your house, you don't care why they broke into your house.
Yeah.
You just don't want to break into your house.
Yeah.
So you're balancing that factor, and I think that's what I think truly has meant the most to me. When you think about law, everybody's heard of the concept of the scales of justice.
Yeah.
Right? And Lady Justice is blind, and she has her eyes wrapped up, and there's two justices.
I don't think I've ever paid attention to that.
Yeah, she's blind.
Yeah.
She's blind, everything you see, and she has these two scales. And the scale is, if you put something on too much, it goes down and goes up. But if you think about it, the whole concept is it should be balanced. And I think that we had a period of time of prosecutors who just ran for office to say, lock them up, throw away the key. Or we're going to give them the book. We're going to throw a book this year. We're going to teach them a lesson. And we know now that we've not taught the lessons we thought we taught by prison, right? When we look at historically the concept, well, there's a lot of laws in the books that are no longer even laws, right? It used to be illegal for me to do tons of things, to look at a white person, speak to them, right, in Mississippi. But even as we see the evolution of marijuana and crack cocaine and crack and cocaine disparities, marijuana legalization of that, I mean, 30 years ago, everything now that you see states making millions of dollars off of will get you in jail. Yeah. And now there's all this stuff is legalized everywhere. It's on Mississippi just voted some medical marijuana initiative. So I mean, everything is changing.
That's a big step for us, I feel like.
The law has to grow with people, and that comes evolution.
Okay, I wanna circle back to another point you made. You were talking about the prison systems and like private prisons. That's a term I've heard a lot, right? Prisons for profit is something I've heard a lot. But I think a lot of the viewers are probably like myself. We don't quite understand exactly how a prison can be for profit. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, and I really would encourage your audience to read Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow.
Okay.
All right. So when you think about slavery, everybody understands slavery. This horrible period, the original sin of America, right? Where people were, you own people. So then when slavery ends, you think about Jim Crow, sharecropping and still kangaroo courts were like, let's hang them. She accused them of doing this. There's no justice there. Well, prisons became the same thing, because if you have a criminal justice system that doesn't exist, it's not real, where poor people and if we're being honest, black lives were worth less than white lives. They didn't deserve the same accountability component, hence the lynchings I mentioned earlier. Well, we had this period in America where we built all these prisons. If you build something, you have to fill it. But there was a concept where private companies would run the prisons and the states would pay them. And the states would pay them per person per day. So for example, let's just pick a round number. Tell you're in prison in Mississippi, and Mississippi does have private prisons. And every day you're in that prison, the state of Mississippi will pay $50 per day for you to be incarcerated. Okay? So you got 10 years in prison. So 10 times 365, all right? Which works out, I guess, about 36,500 days. Okay? And then $50 per day. So how much does it cost to incarcerate you? And so it's a really complicated but simple issue, because at some point in time, we started spending more money on incarcerating people than we did on educating people. But going back to the original question, if you're getting paid every day to hold somebody, what's your incentive in any business? To cut costs, right? Which means you have as little labor as possible, which is few guards, which is why gangs are rampant in prison. Gangs are not rampant in prison because gangs have to exist. They're there for a bunch of reasons, but one of the large reasons is that we don't have correct programming and the activities for people to do stuff to really truly rehabilitate themselves. But the prison profit model is one in which people are encouraged to keep people in prison as long as possible to make money off of it. So what you find that if you look at the corporate statements from these prisons, they want harsher laws in the books. They want to create new reasons to incarcerate you, things that didn't exist.
Because it deepens their pockets.
Absolutely. So they lobby it, and it's also something that's very, I think it's somewhat sympathetic to victims of crime, right? Yeah. You know, people overcorrect in the prison system and the criminal justice system. This is an example I give people. If you're driving a car, okay, and you're falling asleep, so you're driving the car and you're going to fall asleep, and it's late, right? It's late, and all of a sudden you hit the rumble strip, you know, on the side of the interstate. You snatch your car back. Oh man, I was going to sleep. Oh my God. You know, you wake up. Well, I think we've overcorrected things like that in the criminal justice system. Say, for example, mass shootings. Mass shootings, I think some of the early ones were Columbine. Yep. We had Luke Woodham, you know, here in Mississippi and at Pearl. And one of the things we saw is that when we saw these rare events, statistically, I mean, horrible events, but still rare, what happened is that we started putting what's called SROs, or student resource officers, in schools, essentially police in schools. So we started putting police in schools, and I told you earlier, if you build it,
you gotta feel it.
You gotta feel it. Yeah. So what do police do in schools? They start arresting kids in school. You start arresting kids in school for kid-like behavior. Now, when I was in school, I got the fight. I got the fight in 9th grade, or maybe 8th grade. One of the grades got the fight. And I got suspended. So I went home for 3 days. And I mean, this is bad. I mean, you think about your mom, dad, teachers. It was real bad, and it was bad for me at home.
I got you.
It wasn't good in for me on that component.
I got you.
But what I would say is that I didn't go to jail. And now, if I got to fighting in school, I would go to jail. I would be behind bars at a juvenile detention center, which is still a jail. It's a place where they put me in a smock. It's gonna be orange or brown or some other horrible color. I'm gonna be taking a shower in front of somebody watching me. I'm gonna be stripped naked. I'm gonna be fingerprinted. So it's gonna take a picture of me, and I'm gonna sit in the cell, my small, young, adolescent brain, and think about, man. And what we found is that when you put people on parole, probation, or they touch a system like that, they will always be in that system, connected to it. That's when Brian said you touched it in some form or fashion. Because when you go to jail, it doesn't make you better. Now, look, fight lasts all 2 minutes, but here I am spending 30 days in detention, away from my home, my family, and really having, some kids have significant PTS from this, far more than the fight. Fight, you just, you know, put your shoulder around somebody, what you gonna do, what you gonna do? I mean, it's not a real fight. There's a distinction here with bringing weapons and guns and things of that nature and public safety, but I mean, we're seeing just normal fights, schoolyard fights, ending kids in jails, and that's just not common sense. And you know what's interesting about it? The most interesting to me about this? It's a zero-tolerance policy that we see in public schools. Now, I'm a graduate of a public high school. Terry High School is a public school. My parents are public school teachers. But if you go to a private school, they're not calling the police. They're calling your parents, you get to fighting, and they get to fight too. So what's the difference between these two kids? I mean, this is just real life. One is that I could afford to send my kid to this private school, so when they get in trouble, you call me. The other one is that we can't afford it, so you punish them with calling the police and taking them to jail. It's the damnest thing to me.
And Brian and Brian brought up in that TED Talk, and this is the last point from that talk, but like I told you, it was a very, I'm glad you recommended it. But he also said, and this is kind of going off of Mississippi and going to more of an American approach. He said, our nation is a system that is built on, you can either be guilty and rich, or
innocent and poor.
Innocent and poor. And that really, because he was like, a lot of times we see things as a racial issue. Oh, it's black and white. And he didn't take away from the distinction of it being black and white. But he said, when you take a step back and really look at it from a broader scope, it's really rich and poor. Do you agree with him on that stance?
I do. And it pains me to acknowledge that we've tried to, in our system, to find equity there. But the reality is, you got to really unravel what you just said. You could commit a crime and be wealthy, and you're better off than not committing the crime, being charged with crime, being poor. Because we're rewarding affluence, right? We're rewarding the ability to pay for a better component. And I think that is the hypocrisy of America, the hypocrisy of justice, and the hypocrisy of good, right? And that's something we try to take into account. when I'm dealing with a public defender, in fact, we're changing systems. So if you have a public defender, you've been deemed indigent in that you can't afford a lawyer. So we've worked on things in our office that are sliding scales to identify those same issues, to make sure that we're not punishing people for being poor. It's very easy to do, because guess what happens? If you get in trouble, or your child gets in trouble, whether it's in Texas, in Houston, or in Jackson, you might even call me because you have access, right? And you can make sure that this or yourself gets more attention than somebody who's illiterate, who can't read. One of the statistics that we know is that a majority of the prison population, particularly in Mississippi, didn't finish high school, right? And the majority of them have cognitive learning issues or could learn, because if you can learn, you can succeed in some form or facet. If you can't finish high school, particularly in this competitive market, it's certainly challenging to get employment to earn a decent and fair wage. So I think we're punishing people for all these issues that we should give them more, not less, but we're giving them less.
I want to talk to you a little bit about Hinds County in particular. From the outside looking in, it seems to me as if Hinds County in general, but Jackson just gets a bad rap, right? Why do you think that is?
Well, I think
or do you think Jackson, let's even start there. Do you think Jackson and Hinds County get a bad rep?
I think absolutely. Okay. I think it's several issues. I think some of it is motivated by hate and racism. I think that to be the largest city in the state, to be majority African American, to have African American leadership. See, Jackson wasn't always like this. Now, just 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you're old enough and we're old enough to remember that 30 years ago, I guess Tennessee, you have current mayor Antar Lumumba, and then before him you had Tony Yarber, and then before him you had the dad briefly, and then Frank Melton somewhere between, and then Harvey Johnson. That's 5 mayors. So just do that's 4 years a term, do 20 years.
Yeah.
So just about 30 years ago, you had, Kane Ditto, right? You had Dale Danks. These are white mayors.
Yeah.
You didn't hear this criticism of Jackson, and then 30 years ago, you didn't have, Dogwood or Renaissance. Everybody went to Metro Center in North Point. So I think some is based on, and I'm not saying everybody, because we have a mixed culture here. I think that there's a large white population here in Hinds County, and I think they love Jackson. Yeah. But I think there are people who want to tear Jackson down to increase their value, to increase their community. It's the same old thing we saw with, that Duval's taught us and Frederick Douglass, that some people believe that you have to tear others down to be successful. The other issue is I think that urban cities have unique challenges. Okay. Right? I think that when you look at urban cities with access, still economic access to businesses and thriving communities, people move out. People take the resources and they move out. Another issue with Jackson is tax base, dwindling tax base. Think about it. All your government buildings are here, they don't pay taxes. Huge churches here, don't pay taxes. So you're providing services to groups that don't pay taxes, and that's how you benefit, that's how you pay your police, right? Yeah. And that's how you have more services to provide to people. So I think those are the issues that we're seeing, but I also think that we still have a lot to be proud of. I think that Jackson continues to show resilience and growth, young leadership figuring things out. I think there are things being built here, continuing being built here. There's construction all up and down Jackson. Yeah, I've noticed. I mean, we're sitting in, the downtown Cigar Company, who wasn't here 3 years ago, next to 4th Avenue in this block. I think there are 200 apartments being built across the street. Wow. The Weston's always sold out. The King Edward's always sold out. The lofts over there in the old federal courthouse, the lofts next to the old Edson Wathau. So when you see stuff building and happening, you're still motivated to know that some people get it, because people still believe in downtowns. Yeah. It's still the capital city. Yeah. The capital's not going anywhere. University of Mississippi, Dillon School, Med School, Nursing School, all there. Yeah. A Baptist Hospital, St. Dominic Hospital. So, and most importantly, Jackson State University. But also Millsaps and Belhaven, right? Yeah. So I think the rap is, they're literary websites that bash Jackson all day long. That's their function, to bash Jackson and bloggers. You don't see that other places. Yeah. We don't have a mechanism, I think, to counter that in the way that controls the narrative. But I feel safe in Jackson. Sure. I hope people feel safe for us being here and the district attorney's office and what we're doing there.
So you mentioned bloggers, right? I came across, and I wanted to talk to you about this. I came across a think piece while I was doing research on you. I don't want to say who the person was to give them any light, but in that think piece, they said the problem with Jackson is that we're too soft on crime. But what I found interesting was a simple Google search, and this may not be a factual statistic, but a Google search that I found was outside of the surrounding counties, we have the highest conviction rate, right? So how could someone say we're soft on crime? And I guess my more direct and concise question to you is, do you believe Jackson is soft, Hinds County is soft on crime?
Well, I know we're not, right? And I know this directly because of my role in it. When I was sworn into office, I decided to make sure that a life in Hinds County and Jackson would be worth the same as a life anywhere. Before meeting with you, my last call of the day was with a victim of a violent crime. She lost her son to a violent crime. I won't say her name because the case is still pending. But if we try the case, the individual will get life in prison. But right now, the offer on the table is 35 years. Well, nobody would tell you that 35 years, you'd be 2056 is light on crime. Last week, I tried a murder case, and the defendant got life in prison. And that was a case where an individual shot and killed a store owner. You know, life. I mean, I think we're doing it. I think people have to see it and want to believe it, but also we have to make sure we're doing a good job telling people what we're doing. I think sometimes we can be our own worst enemy. I think humility teaches us not to brag, but in some instances, we have to make sure that we have to do what we need to do to control the narrative.
I got you. And then, so when you talk about justice, right? What does justice per se mean to you as a DA? Like, how do you define justice in a situation?
Yeah, see, to me, justice is a combination of a few things. It's equity, right? It's fairness. It's appreciating that every situation is independent. And a lot of people don't understand that. They think, well, the crime is simple. He did it. He should do this. But there's a huge significance on what we've seen happen in some of those instances where people are abusing drugs, have mental issues. Huge mental issue component with untreated, undiagnosed, misdiagnosed, and mental illness and what it contributes to. So justice to me means equity under the law. And by equity, I mean that your crime will be consistently treated the same way. It's a serious crime, it should be treated seriously. But we're also willing to understand the contributing factors to a situation. It's always not what meets the eye. And you do your very best with that. It's a challenge, to be frank with you. It's a challenge every day. For example, the woman I just mentioned to you. So on Monday, the man might plead for 35 years in prison. But if she wants to try the case, you know, he could walk, he's not guilty. You know, but she said, you know, her baby's gone. He was 20 when he was killed. He had just finished Tougaloo, or it was Tougaloo College. And she just didn't get it. She didn't get that regardless. Well, let me rephrase it. She did get it. She did get it. She got regardless it wasn't going to bring him back. But she didn't get the concept of, you know, there's a possibility he might walk and how would that happen? And I said, well, you know, it's 12 jurors and all the jurors could, you just need one if they're not guilty.
Okay. So a question I have for you was just, again, going back to, I guess I keep referencing a lot of points from this talk. It gave me a lot of talking points. But when we talk about, to continue the conversation of justice, right? When we talk about somebody who may have committed what you may feel to be a heinous crime, let's say some guy murdered someone, right? When you go to try a person, like, how do you determine what you're gonna go for as far as, I don't know what it would be called, the professional term be a sentence or something like that. Like, in what scenarios do you feel like the death penalty is justice? In what scenarios is a 35 years? Like, how do you gauge that? That's a interesting
Well, the death penalty
process.
is a very complicated conversation. I'm not a proponent of a death penalty because generally, for a few reasons. One, it's been disproportionately used against African Americans and shown to be ineffective at preventing future crime, right? I get it. I totally get why someone would prefer the death penalty over a long prison sentence. But the reality is, I think that if you spent 40 years of life in Parchman, you're gonna wish you were dead every day.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, in one of the most notorious prisons in the country. Two, with the death penalty, there's so many appeals in process. You have to be really careful about re-victimizing families and have to go through this. What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? I think finality. A lot of families can't get some sense of healing until this thing is over.
Yeah.
Well, death penalty just extends it, maybe for decades.
Yeah.
You know, so you see that. So I think that also is problematic. For me, when I look at what sentence is appropriate, I try to balance what's on the books, what the law statutorily gives me. So, for example, first-degree murder, life without the possibility of parole. Second-degree murder here in Mississippi is between 40 and 20 years, day for day. Now, that's a huge difference between 20 and 40 years.
Yeah, that's a lot.
You know, that's 2 more decades. So if on the low end you're 20, on the high end you're 40. How does one decide? I think a lot of factors go into that. I think the age of the defendant, the age of the victim are one factor. Another factor would be, as you said, the nature of the crime. How violent is it? Is it more violent in nature, more sadistic in nature? Was it cold, depraved murder? Or was it something where more of a domestic violence instance where things got a hand and this tragedy happened? And one of the most important things that happens is what the victims want and what the victims think. The consideration there is a lot for us. Victims have rights, and you have to honor those rights. So when I told you about the lady I spoke to this morning, right before I came here, I asked her what she wanted to do. We might try that case on Monday. We might take the plea, give the plea. It just depends on what she wants to do.
So when you talk about plea, right? Like, can you explain what is the purpose of a plea deal? I know it's thrown around. It's in like a lot of rap music, and I know that's very cliche to say, but I beat the plea, But what exactly, from a more educated opinion, what exactly is a plea? And then I'd like you to answer, what is the purpose of a plea?
So a plea is an offer that is made by the prosecution's office for an individual to plead guilty to a crime and what amount of time she or he will serve or what the punishment might be. It might be home confinement. It might be an ankle monitor. It might be supervised probation. It might be 10, 20, even 30 years. So a plea is what you will accept for an acknowledgement that you have committed the crime, AKA your punishment. Now, your second question was, what's the purpose of it? Well, cases are resolved in essentially one of 3 ways. They're dismissed because you don't have the evidence to move forward, or the evidence doesn't support the charge. 2, by plea, and 3, by trial, which is a trial and a jury of your peers. Across the country, I forget the statistics, but I want to say it's greater than 90% of cases are resolved by plea. And because plea generally is you can control it. The defendant can control it, and the prosecution can control it because you're negotiating what amount of time is appropriate. The example I gave you, between 20 and 40 years. Well, if you're facing 40, but you can plea and take 30, I didn't get 40.
Yeah.
But for the victims and for the prosecutors, like, well, we got that certainty of 30 years. So the community is safer, and that's extreme. It might be something 3 to 10 years. It might be, 0 for 5 years. It might be what can I get back to my family? When can I come back to being a productive citizen? So the purpose of it really is the certainty of knowing, because, what a jury would do, you never know. We've had great success since I've been DA, asking jurors for things that they returned. We think we present great cases, and they've given the max. Because once you are found guilty by a jury, there's no negotiation. The judge sentences you to time. So then the responsibility is totally to the judge. So what do you want to control? What 12 people will do, or what you can control through your lawyer, and what the district attorney's office can control in that process?
Great answer. Very eloquent, by the way. But when we talk about judges, do you think that judges have too much power? And the reason I asked that question is because I looked at something, and they said it was a kid somewhere in one of these states. He had committed a crime. He was like 13, a young kid, and the judge did some type of, order where the kid could be tried as an adult. He was 13, right? And he made it. Obviously, the crime probably was, again, maybe in a heinous crime. I don't know. Right. But do you think that they have too much power? Is that, in what scenarios is that a good idea to say, hey, you're 13, but we're going to try you like you're a grown man?
So you asked two questions. The question one is whether the judges have too much power. Question two, is it appropriate for the legal system to make kids adult for the purposes of punishing them?
Correct.
Because if you think about it, you can't buy cigarettes until you're 18.
Mm-hmm.
You can't drink legally until you're 21. You can't join the military until you're 18.
Mm-hmm.
But the criminal justice system has this unique hypocrisy, I think is an appropriate word to say, to make you an adult before you're ever an adult. And also to take you from being an adult. How old do you have to be until you can vote? 18.
18, yeah.
Well, think about this. You can be charged with something, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17 in Mississippi, convicted, and you'll never have the right to vote. You can disenfranchise somebody before they can ever vote, which is a way of suppression of individuals. So, I mean, and I'm gonna go to the voting in a second, but the reason I think that's important is that I think what we're saying is that you can take a right from me before it was ever given to me. How powerful is that system?
Yeah.
But that's why I think the right to vote is important. When we talk about our judges too powerful, the question is, it's a reminder of how powerful the right to vote is. And are we using the right to vote because we elect our judges here in Mississippi? And are we voting the right people? Are we educated about the impact they have? Most people don't know what judges do unless they appear in front of them in a civil case or a criminal case. And at that point, they're like, well, you know, the judge has so much power. So I think the right to vote is the most powerful thing that we should focus on. But I don't want to run from your question. So I want to say this. I think the district attorney has so much power because we're deciding what to bring forth for somebody. And I've often struggled with the amount of power it is because it's just so much. You can ruin somebody's life by simply indicting them. They don't have to be guilty just by accusing them. So it has to be checked. And judges in Mississippi, when I was a civil rights lawyer, we would challenge the concept of what we call justice by geography. Justice by geography. And what that would mean is that your sentence in DeSoto County might be totally different than your sentence in Hinds County. And your sentence in Rankin County might be totally different than your sentence in Harrison County on the coast. And that's problematic, right? Because what controls that? Is it the citizens? Do they want to say, well, you had some weed, so we're going to give you, in the pistol, we're going to give you 10 years? As opposed to in another county, it's like, well, everybody carries guns now. I mean, it's going to be gun shows all the time. So is it legal? I mean, we're a right to carry state.
Yeah.
You know, so like, I think that when we question judges' power, I think that the system itself has so much power. We do want a system of checks and balances. We've started a conviction integrity unit in our office. And we've not publicized it because we're still putting some of the puzzles and pieces there. But what it does is that we review bad sentencings. Like this week, we had the Innocence Project from New Orleans in our office to look at some old cases where people said they were innocent. And the DNA was perhaps never tested, or now the DNA could be tested differently because of the evolution of technology. Because the worst thing you can do is have someone who didn't commit a crime get convicted, right? So as far as judges go, it's really hard to say. You hope the judges have a spirit of discernment and mercy with their punishment, but they have such a difficult job. We joke in the office and say, you know, we're the angels trying to bring it to them, you know, I mean, both sides, you know, the defense lawyers and the prosecutors, both angels trying to bring it to them, probably over glorification of our role, but the judges are the gods. I mean, they have so much power. You know, if I can give a judge a plea sentence, she or he might reject it. So, I mean, the significant challenge is there.
So they can say no.
They can say go back and give me something else. Generally, they will take the good judges who trust the district attorney's office, who understand the things they might not know, will generally trust the DA to make the most informed decision. But some just have to feel comfortable in their own component of it. And they might feel like you missed something, which is certainly their prerogative. But I think all of us in some ways, as I talk, you know, if you talk to my team, we talk ourselves back and forth on these things. A good lawyer, a great lawyer, that was one of my mentors, a lawyer named Rob McDuff, once said to me that good lawyers reconsider their positions all the time. And I think that's the way you have to be. And throughout our days, we say, well, should we do this? Should we do that? And when we back and forth, I don't want yes people on our team. I want people that push back and say, okay, let's put our position aside. Let's go to the opposite position. That's the only way I think you truly get at an objective position on most issues.
So, Jody, I want to ask this question, right? So when you think back on your career, and not just currently as the DA, right, but your entire career in its totality, what what would you say was one of the biggest sacrifices you made, and also, do you think it was worth it?
Yeah, it's a deep question. You always know that the sacrifice that you make as an elected official, and also in the military, is that of your family. I think about when I'm gone, the nights I'm gone for my kids. I try to include them on this stuff. I try to do things that would benefit them from it, and they do benefit from it, they do. But I realize that there's a lot of time away from your family, and that, you know, what's the old saying that when people are on their deathbed, no one ever says they should have worked more.
Yeah.
They should spend more time traveling and spending time with loved ones. So I think that's one now. I mean, the campaign, I involve my kids a lot. They canvassed with me. They did a commercial for me. I try to include them in the way.
Cool.
But when I look at the career, you know, the sacrifice is kind of strange like that. If a person has a goal, say for example, law school, you know, I'm gonna go through law school, I'm gonna take this LSAT, I'm gonna, you know, study and get this degree, and I'm gonna study all summer long for this one test at the bar. But then when you get to the top, it kind of made sense, right? So for me, I've been really fortunate to have favor.
Okay.
You know, favor's not always fair, but I've been fortunate to have it. And when I've sacrificed, it's generally always been worth it. You know, there's something about the struggle. There's something about, you know, the heat process to make an iron, right? You know, I've always been able to not always win, but always to, even whether I won or not, I learned from the struggles. So I appreciate the challenge. I mean, we've won more cases than we've lost, certainly in the DA's office, but we've lost some, and we've learned from those too. So it's always been worth it. I wouldn't have it any other way, but I can tell you that the sacrifice certainly gets harder and it costs more. I mean, people have no idea how expensive it is to run for office, how time consuming it is. And I had two opponents, but you know what? We won.
Yeah.
They probably learned something from it too. But it's sacrifice always costs you something. What you hope to do, if you can strategize about your energy level and your purpose in life, is continue to water the parts of your life that you're forgetting. So for example, when I ran for office, I couldn't take my kids out of town, couldn't spend time with them. So I purposely made sure the next year that we had all these little mini things we were doing. We developed a movie night and a crawfish night. All right, we're gonna watch, my daughter picked the movie, the kids picked the food, and we sat down to make up for lost time. And I think that's what life gives you. There's nothing wrong with sacrifice, but you have to realize that if you're taking from something else, when are you going to make sure that you communicate that something else will be back, and when are you going to find a way to give it back?
I got you. Let me ask you. So how do you define success in this field, right? And I guess even on a more personal note, how do you define success personally? You know.
So in this field, you know, I've had 3 different careers legally in almost 2 decades. And in one career, it was to help the corporations win. You know, I mentioned those companies. It was to make sure they didn't pay any money, or if they paid the money, it was the money commensurate with the damage they had caused. In the second field, it was about advancing systemic change to make a more fair Mississippi, a more just Mississippi. And now it's about a combination of accountability and mercy, because I've seen the disparities that we talked about earlier. It's about making sure that people are not punished because they're poor. It's about making sure that victims feel respected. You know, the question has to be asked, can you have multiple quote unquote masters to serve in this role? Victims of crime, the dignity of defendants, the safety of the larger community. Can you do that? And it's a difficult job, but I think that's how we're measuring success now. It's not about winning or losing trials. Obviously, if we take a case to trial, we plan on winning it. And again, we've won more by far than we've lost. Statistically, I will use that. In my first year, we fixed 2 huge backlogs of indictments and fixed problems with the system. So improving the system constantly, but like in any system, there has to constantly be improvements because there's constant challenges. When I got elected in 2019 in August and then in 2019 in November in the general election, you couldn't have told me that COVID would happen in 5 months. So like, what does that mean? There's no jurors coming, you can't have trial, there's a pandemic, the whole world is shut down. So that's tweaking the system. And for me personally, you know, I've never thought of it that way. I can tell you what's not been for me. It's never been money. I've always known that I can do things and make more money. If money was the driving force for me, I would have stayed with my first employer, and I would probably be double or triple my salary now. I think impact.
Okay.
I think for me, it's been impact. I think it changes for different people. Consistently, I think it's been, am I impactful enough with my core values and my core system, and am I leaving the world through what I'm doing in a better place? You know, did I make a difference?
Yeah.
And I think if you can go to bed at night and feel like that you made an impact, a positive impact, but then your job is well done.
And you teed up this question for me. So when you think about legacy, right? Your legacy as a DA and your legacy just as Jody Owens, what do you want that to be?
I want people to say that I was a good man, trying to do the right thing, always. You see, when you run for office, you get used to this component of people saying negative things about you. I mean, it's politics. It's kind of like, high school politics. Not so different, just with a lot more access and a lot more resources. So they're on the radio talking about you, on TV talking about you. And then, there's some jobs, I think the mayor has this challenge too, that some people you just can't make happy, but you lose anonymity, right? Like literally, you can say bad things about me that could be false, and because I'm a public official, the law protects you, and I can't sue you for defamation or slander, right? You can do all these things. So for me, when the record is finally written, I hope people will believe that I got more right than I got wrong, and that I was just a good man. I mean, that's not a perfect man, not the greatest man, not even category of man, just a good person.
Yeah.
If that can be my legacy, that would be enough. I mean, I've tried to always treat people who I come in contact with a certain level of dignity and the way I want to be treated, right? Life is too short. I mentioned favor to you. I've been so blessed by people who I've been in contact with. For me, I want to make sure that I am leading by example that way. So if I leave it better and they say he was fair, he was just, he was a good person, I think the impact takes care of itself in those ways.
So from everything I've heard you tell me today, I can tell you one thing. I don't want to be a DA, but I do want to ask the question, how do you then, because there are, just from listening to you talk, there are a lot of hard decisions it sounds like you and your team have to make on a daily basis. How do you deal with the quote unquote anxiety or the quote unquote, just uncomfortable decisions that you have to make sometimes?
Physical and mental health are really big things for me. I work out, almost every day if I can, but limited 5 days a week. I meditate, independent of working out. I think mindfulness is really important. In 2019, I was told that I was going to Afghanistan right before I was going to be sworn in for the new job. And I went through that process of getting ready to be mobilized to go to Afghanistan for a year for my family. Everything from, anthrax shots to having code words that you have to give to the military in case you get captured.
Yeah.
Really scary stuff.
Yeah.
If you're being honest. But that's what we signed up for in that role. And I realized that some things can induce anxiety. So I started doing a lot more mindfulness, Headspace apps.
I use that app.
Yeah, I use that one. I do a lot of stuff with Peloton has a meditation component, but I realized I had to get out of my own head. And the healthiest version of yourself has to be something that is not one of the, can't be alcohol, can't be smoking, can't be drugs. There's enough natural things you can do. So I've tried to find safe head spaces to be my best self, because only then can you make the right decisions. I'm healthier now than I was before any other job. I've always practiced, but I realized that it's so paramount now than it ever was, because the stress and the anxiety is just so high. I mean, it's nothing for me to be worried about getting a decision wrong, but more importantly, it's nothing for me to realize that my kids who surf the internet all the time can see an article bashing their dad.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you're just like, wow, this is a lot. But you get used to it if you're built the right way. Everyone's not built for it. I have a team of people who are around me who support me, who motivate me, who uplift me, and I keep that circle small. I found that to be really critical too. Have a base of people you trust, you can go to, and I think that's going through anything. I mean, any challenges in life, you have to make sure you keep the positive things in your life around you, wrapped around you, and continue to stay focused on what's important. The issues really come in life for all people when they focus on the wrong things. You know, keep the right thing or the first thing first, all right, and things. And I also this too. I heard this recently when I was reading something, maybe a podcast. I've come to realize that I have to remind myself all the time, this too shall pass. You know, you hear certain things like that, particularly the Black funeral experience, you know, joy cometh in the morning and look for the hills which are your strength. But I really think that when you stop listening to what people are really telling you, you can miss the point. And I think the point in those things is that everything is going to pass. Everything is going to go. And you can worry about stuff that won't happen, that's not here. You can consume yourself with it, and that's when anxiety creeps up on you and just consumes you. But when you're able to realize it's going to pass, you know, it was a tough day, we'll get up and do it tomorrow. We used to joke all the time, you know, the old cartoon, you might be a little young to appreciate this, but Pinky and the Brain.
Oh, yeah.
And they would say every day, what are we going to do today? Same thing we do every day, try to take over the world.
Yeah.
But there was a commitment that every day, we're going to start over. We're going to do it again. And that's why you go to sleep, you know, your shower, your bath, you sometimes I go home and I just wash the day away.
Yeah.
You know, just give me a few minutes when I get home, my kids know, Dad's going to just give me that way. And usually the next day is always better.
Makes it better.
Or whatever had you in a bad place doesn't bother you as much then. The relationship advice I give young folks all the time is that you're never that mad 48 hours later. Whatever you thought you were mad at. Never as mad as you really were.
Yeah, never.
And then when you can accept that, just keep it moving. So
I agree with you. That's a good point. You're never that mad 48 hours later. But I guess to go ahead and start wrapping this up here, what do you want the people watching this to know about you, Jody? Like, what do you want them to know about you?
Well, I want them to know that we're trying to get things right. I want them to know we're someone who appreciates thoughts and prayers, and we solicit all good ideas, but we believe in that we can get it right. You know, I think it's a false choice to ask yourself, do you see the world as it is or as it should be? I mean, people ask that question all the time. You know, are you an optimist or a pessimist on these things? No, you just got to keep working hard, and that's what we're doing. You know, I think my story is still being written. God gave me this opportunity. We're trying to maximize it and be impactful, but I have no idea what the chapters of my life will lead to. I'm just really trying to enjoy the ride and do the right things, and I think if you take care of the now, the future will take care of itself. When I told you about the two major jobs I had before this one, well, both of those jobs prepared me for this one. I didn't see it, didn't know it, which is why I tell you, you understand it backwards, but you live it forward. So if there's anything I would take away from my journey so far is that it's been a hell of a ride, and it's not over yet.
Gotcha. And something we do here at Dirty Napkins, we always like to make sure we leave the people with something, right? Something on a positive note. So any last words of encouragement, any piece of advice or anything that you would like to impart on the people watching or listening to this right now?
Well, that's a loaded question. I got to say something that might be rememberable, at least for 30 seconds. I would tell the people what I mentioned to you earlier. Ordinary people can do extraordinary things when given the opportunity. And for those who are trying to figure out their journey or their purpose in life, I know no truer statement than just to prepare yourself and pray and hope that you get your chance. I mean, that's it. I mean, you want to prepare yourself because you don't want the opportunity to come, you're not ready for it because you've not done what you need to do. I do not think there's a substitute for hard work. I do not think there's a substitute for dedication. When I mentor students, I tell them all the time, there's not that big of a difference between a C student and an A student. You know, and that's you jump in B. You know, A, B, C. It's just a few more hours. So dedicate yourself to your craft. Stay committed. Remember, you decide if somebody outworks you. And the two things only the two things you really can control in life are your attitude and your effort. You know, your attitude and your effort. So choose to be happy. Choose to work really hard, and hopefully everything will work out for everyone.
Great words of advice. I think that'll be memorable for at least 30 seconds for sure. But tell the audience where they can find you if they wanna come look for you.
Yeah. I'm easy to find. My email is jody@smartjusticems.com. MS being Mississippi.com. Our office is downtown in Pascagoula. They can call the office anytime they want. We take emails. They can arrange a visit. We have a website that should be interactive in about 30 days. They can make a request for us or just give us ideas and feedback about things they think are working and not working in Mississippi or other parts of the country.
Sure.
I mean, I think Brian Stevenson said it best. When you realize that we incarcerate more people than everyone else in the world, but we don't have the largest population, or we're doing things wrong, we have a long way to go, and we certainly need all the help, support, and well wishes we can get.
Sure. Well, one last thing from the team. This is from the entire team here at Dirty Napkins, including myself. It's a small token of appreciation for you just taking the time out of your busy day to sit down and talk with us and just give us some of your time, some of your wisdom, some of your knowledge. I know there's a lot of people watching this who took a lot from what you said, and you answered a lot of questions that I think a lot of people had. So from the entire team here, we just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We'll wear this with pride and honor.
All right.
I'm really appreciative of not just this time, but you know, I think that's the biggest opportunity you have when you have a platform, is to use that platform. And I think that a lot of people forget that there's so many people, particularly young boys and young girls, who are still struggling to find their way. So if we can say something that serves some level of motivation for them, we hope that they will know they can do it too.
Okay. Well, before we get started and really just dive into the questions, you've introduced me to a really nice spot. I like it. It's low key, my kind of speed. But where exactly are we?
Okay, so we're located in the downtown Cigar Company's back room, which is called the library.
Okay.
It's a speakeasy room where members can come in and they can store beverages in the lockers. You know, there's approximately 226 different faces of cigars, which is, you know, cigars like wine have flavors, have taste, everything from Groovy Blue, which is a poppest in the country, to Zenos. And this is a place that me and my business partners put together in 2018 because we saw a need. We saw that downtown Jackson will not come back unless we build it back, and that needs to be a place where gentlemen and gentle ladies could come and enjoy a conversation and a cocktail over a cigar. The tradition of cigars is a timeless art where individuals can gather and converse and meet and plan and just relax from the day. So we saw a need, and what we've become over the last 2.5 years is one of the most popular cigar establishments in Mississippi.
Sure.
And we're proud of what we've done, but most importantly, we're proud that people have a place together and they feel, particularly during the pandemic, that they can get out and still be themselves.
How did you get into cigars?
Well, when I was in law school, I slowly started participating in understanding cigars. It's an art, you know, how to cut cigars, how to smoke cigars. It's not like smoking anything else. It's different than anything else people have smoked. But I found that it also is a great pairing. It goes with whiskey, it goes with scotch, it goes with the right wine, the right blend. And for us, we realized that we needed a place that had a certain scale to it. You know, no fighting, no cussing, just a place where you could feel relaxed. So, you know, there's TVs on every wall, but it really is a place that you can be yourself. And there's not a lot of those places where it's not a club that way. So.
And I feel that way. I feel like it's a real chill vibe. I feel like it's and this is just me talking about your place. I feel like it's a really chill vibe. I really like, you know, how comfortable it is. Like I immediately came in, sat in the couch, and I was like, man, I feel like I need a cigar almost, you know?
You know, what's interesting is that when we built this place, we had no intention of running for district attorney. So it wasn't like we thought, okay, one day we're going to do this. Those are two separate things. I've always appreciated kind of an entrepreneur spirit of looking at what we could build and what we could do in this venture and others. And I think that this has been kind of a home run. So
I think so too.
thank you.
I appreciate you introducing a guy like me. I don't know much about cigars or sticks, I guess as my brother calls them. Talk to me a little bit about this selection. You got a whole spread out here.
Yeah, and we have more than 200 faces of cigars. And a face is you have a line of cigars, but they come in different cuts, different sizes. The Toro, the Robusto, depending on the size. You also have different gauges. And the gauge would be how round the cigar is, which could include how much tobacco is in the cigar and how long you would even smoke a cigar. Now, I don't smoke cigarettes, but if you think about a cigarette smoker can finish a cigarette in 3 minutes, right? Well, a cigar, you could smoke some for at least 30 minutes to an hour. Oh, wow. So it's an experience. And here we just have a couple of my favorites. The Zeno Platinum is a high-end cigar. It's a Zeno series. It comes in the case. You feel free to twist it. It's the barrel. It's one of the most popular selling cigars in the country, but it's a smooth smoke. And when you think about cigars, for me, I always ask people what they like to taste, what they like to eat, right? And you see how that's wrapped, and you want to preserve a cigar, which is why we have all these in this climate-controlled humidor. What I have in my hand is an Aston ESG, which is a premium brand of Aston cigar, also a very famous and popular brand, one of the largest brands in the country. And now, you still can't get and sell Cubans legally in the United States. So for the most part, a lot of your tobacco is coming from El Salvador, different places, Dominican Republic, where leaves are actually grown. And oftentimes you'll see the magazines, you'll see people actually take and roll the cigars. And every cigar is hand rolled that way with professional rollers. Here we have what's called a 10th edition Champagne Perdomo. And it's a very popular cigar, great smoke. Notice how the difference in this color here, how light it is as opposed to this crux, which is darker, right? Darker is going to be kind of a heavier smoke. Think about your wine. If you were a wine connoisseur, you would say a Pinot Noir might be a little lighter red as opposed to a Cabernet, which might be bolder, right? And you know the difference between the Merlot.
Yep.
Same
tells you
yeah. I mean, and the same thing here. Tobacco is a leaf that's rolling together, quality control, which is why you have certain brands that you know. Here is a Tantianto Groovy Blue and an Acid, which is a Blondie.
So that will be this will probably be a stiff smoke based off of the color.
Well, actually,
right?
that's true, but both of these are flavored cigars.
Okay.
And so we have a separate humidor. There are 4 flavored cigars. Certain people just like flavors, so you have everything from cherry to blossom, to Hawaiian blue flavors. This Groovy Blue is one of the best sellers in the country, this Acid. We even have coffee type cigars, that way. So a lot of people smoke their cigars with coffee in the morning. There are some smokers who smoke 3 or 4 cigars a day. And many who don't drink, but they are smoked. They found it safer from a standpoint of DUIs and also from a standpoint of controlling calories. It's a combination, but most people pair different things at different times. I've smoked everything that we have here. It's important to me to kind of know what it tastes like and what you're having, what the demand looks like. But when you fall in love with cigars, I mean, everything like this lighter and this cutter.
Like a torch
you need a torch, or if you're going to smoke a cigar the right way. You can use matches. We've actually used a lot of matches through the COVID because you want to have sanitation that way. Usually you have the big lighter that somebody turns, but the torch. When you smoke a cigar, you want to smoke it the right way. It's important that when you're lighting it, that it burns evenly, right? So it's really important. So notice how I'm burning this cigar right there. So let me do it this way so you can see it. So notice how when we burn it round, right? So because you want it to burn even. So you can always tell when somebody does it the right way. Right before I get started, right? So then.
I see. You're getting a good circle, like really. Excuse my ignorance here, but really kind of prepping the whole, like the entire, like that circular motion. It's not just like
you want it to burn even. A good cigar is packed really, really tight, so you can touch it that way and you can feel the tobacco. There's also several type of cuts: a V cut, a straight cut, a punch, and all the cuts would dictate how much smoke you're inhaling at any different time. And that's what's really important when you. you decide how you want to smoke a cigar, you have to know how you want to inhale it. And all that's about the cut and the flame and to make sure it's evenly done. I mean, it really is an art. It's something like if I sit this here, I could put it down, go make a phone call, come back. Look how it burns slow. You see that? I mean, and that's the quality of cigars. You want to make sure it's something that will burn and you can sit down, have a conversation and pick it back up. And it's one of the things I kind of fell in love with because I realized that you need it, but it's also the conversation piece of I can take as much as I want. I can sit down. I can actually put it out and come back to it, right?
Oh, you can do
Yeah,
that.
I can put it. Yeah, you can cut out and chip it depending on how in a hurry you are. But this right here, this is 20 or 30 minutes. I mean, we would sit down and out. I mean, it's a whole thing, and you know, there's certain rules to it. There's certain etiquette to it. There's certain rules to it. I mean, like you would not want to. You want a long ash. You want it to burn slow and show that you're doing it that way. And
I
then,
heard you don't ash them.
No.
He's a cigar smoker.
Yeah, he totally gets it. But even look how the smoke rises that way. And here we have a vacuum kind of suction system here and in both rooms that takes it out. That way you're filtering the smoke out too. But it is an art. It's been around, you know, hundreds of years. And what we found is that we continue to grow with our community and what they like. We try to get something new in every week. And, you know, make sure people know that if you want a smoke, if you want an experience, we want to have it here for you. Yeah. And it shocked me to find out at one point in time, I think the most we had was, almost 300 different faces of cigars for people to choose from, because how you choose. But when you find what you like eating or drinking or the perfect scotch, that's your thing.
This was a good lesson on cigars. Now I know enough about the topic to be dangerous.
Yeah, look. In the magazines, their clubs. I mean, there's a shirt that people wear that's a play on the Game of Thrones where I smoke cigars and I know things, right? And that's one thing that Tyrion used to always say. I just know things. But I mean, you just feel like it passes the time in the appropriate and responsible way amongst people who appreciate it.
I agree.
So
I like that. Well, thanks for the lesson on that.
Thank you. Please try some, and anytime you want to come back and at the Downtown Cigar Company and try something, I'd love to sit down with you too.
I'm gonna hold you to that.
Well, maybe we'll do a post interview, a year in review of seeing what things look like.
And I'll bring a couple bottles. Do you drink wine at all?
I think I do.
Okay.
I think
I'll
I do.
bring a couple bottles. I'm a wine drinker. That's my thing.
You bring the wine, I'll bring the cigars, and we'll pair them, and we'll see how it works out.
Let's do it.
Looking forward to it. All right.
You got a deal.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Jody Owens here at the Downtown Cigar Company. Be sure to follow us on all social media platforms at Dirty Napkins. Until next time, it's your host, Taylor. Welcome. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Dirty Napkins. Today, I'll be having a conversation.
She's an entrepreneur.
She's a social influencer, owner of Exclusive Inches, the district attorney of Hinds County, who's a local photographer who is taking over the real estate game.
Let's go get some napkins dirty.
Nice to finally formally meet you.
Thank you, thank you.
Oh.
I graduated high school May 26th of 2000.
I used to do a lot of film photography. I don't as much anymore.
Okay.
I'm the Hinds County District Attorney, which makes me the top prosecutor for about 8 cities.
So when MBAR's image began to shift a little bit, we did have a little bit of resistance from certain folks.
And a lot of times growing up, we limit people to who they should be. Doctor, nurse, lawyer, police, fireman.
I do plan to do acting more so than singing, but if
Okay.
I have the opportunity to sing.
That was my plan, is to teach. Left, go in the music business.
We're bringing Drake, but it was just going to be a family trip.
What do you want them to know about you?
I want them to know that we're trying to get things right.
So I went to my mom. Her credit wasn't good. She said, well, tried it. It didn't work.
When you're creative, there's always something burning inside you to make you create.
Majorette is so much deeper than what people think it is.
What was one of the biggest sacrifices?
Time away from my kids.
How does a young kid think about Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee? These are old Black legendary actors.
I think it's so critical to be keen and aware of the people that you keep around you.
Literally, you can say bad things about me that could be false, and because I'm a public official, the law protects you, and I can't sue you for defamation or slander.
I had a number in my head that I wanted to spend on this office space.
What's one of your more proud moments? What would you say?
The moment I decided to give time to my craft, that moment, as a mom.
So every day is different. We're learning something new every single day, but we kind of step in and help small business owners.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Dirty Napkins. Be sure to follow us on all social media platforms at Dirty Napkins. Until next time, it's your host, Taylor.